She was only the transfer student. Maya Chen walked through the gleaming corridors of the Galactic Academy station, her worn Earth-issued backpack looking completely out of place among the floating data tablets and holographic displays that other students carried effortlessly. The massive space station orbited the neutral world of Proxima 7, serving as the most prestigious educational institution in known space. Students from dozens of different species attended classes here, their parents paying fortunes for the privilege. Maya was different. She was here on a scholarship program that nobody quite understood, including herself. The paperwork had simply arrived at her modest apartment on Earth 6 months ago, written in multiple languages she couldn't read, with only the English translation stating that she had been selected for advanced xenological studies at the Academy. Her guidance counselor back home had been just as confused, but the full scholarship was real, and Maya's family couldn't afford to question good fortune. Now, standing in the central plaza of the station, Maya felt the weight of dozens of eyes studying her. The other students weren't hostile exactly, but their curiosity was obvious. Humans were still relatively new to galactic society, having only made first contact 30 years ago. Most of the other species had been part of the Galactic Council for centuries. Another human, she heard someone whisper in Galactic Standard, the universal language she had been rapidly studying for months. The speaker was a tall, blue-skinned Altarian with flowing tentacle hair that shimmered as they moved. I thought there was only supposed to be one per cycle. Maya's cheeks burned. She knew she was the second human student this year, which was apparently unusual. The first, a boy named Marcus Webb from New Tokyo, had arrived 2 weeks earlier and was already making waves in the advanced physics programs. Maya, on the other hand, was struggling just to understand her class schedule. She found her first classroom after getting lost twice and asking directions from a helpful insectoid student whose name she couldn't pronounce. The subject was comparative galactic history, and Maya slipped into a seat near the back, hoping to avoid attention. The professor was a Vorthon, one of the oldest and most respected species in the galaxy. Their crystalline form caught the light beautifully as they moved, creating rainbow patterns across the classroom walls. When Professor Zethka spoke, their voice resonated with harmonics that made Maya's bones vibrate slightly. Today we begin our study of species integration patterns, Professor Zethka announced. Each species brings unique perspectives to our galactic community. The Altarians contributed their mastery of biotechnology. The Nexari shared their understanding of quantum mechanics. The Krillian Empire brought military organization and strategic thinking. Maya took notes furiously, trying to keep up with concepts that seemed to assume knowledge she didn't have. Around her, other students nodded along as if this was all elementary information. And then we have the newest additions, the professor continued. The humans of Earth integrated just 3 decades ago. Their contribution to galactic society is still being evaluated. Several students turned to look at Maya, and she felt her face grow hot again. She hadn't asked to be a representative of her entire species, but apparently, that's what she was here. After class, Maya was gathering her things when another student approached. This one was humanoid but clearly not human, with pale green skin and large dark eyes that seemed to reflect starlight. "You're the new human," the student said in accented galactic standard. "I'm Kiravel from the Thessian colonies. Don't mind the staring. Everyone's curious about your species." "Thanks," Maya replied, relieved to have someone actually talk to her instead of just whispering about her. "I'm Maya, and honestly, I'm just as curious about everyone else's species." "This is all pretty overwhelming," Kiravel laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "I can imagine. Your people went from thinking you were alone in the universe to this in just 30 years. That's incredibly fast by galactic standards. Most species have centuries to prepare for integration." They walked together toward the next class block, and Maya found herself relaxing for the first time since arriving. Kiravel explained some of the social dynamics between different species groups, pointing out various students and their backgrounds. "The tall ones with the silver skin are ethereals," Kiravel explained quietly. "They're telepathic, so be careful what you think around them. The furry ones that look almost like earth cats are Felinians, but don't mention the resemblance unless you want to offend them. And those," she pointed to a group of students who looked like walking trees, "are Verdanian. They photosynthesize, so they spend a lot of time in the solar gardens." Maya's head spun, trying to keep track of all the different species and their characteristics. "How do you remember all of this?" "Practice," Kiravel said with a smile. Plus, I've been here for 2 years already. You'll pick it up faster than you think. The next class was Basic Xenobiology, and Maya hoped it would be more manageable than the history course. The professor was human, which surprised her. Dr. Sarah Kim had apparently been one of the first human scholars to study at the academy, and she now taught courses to help new students understand the biological diversity of galactic species. Welcome to those of you just joining us, Dr. Kim said, her eyes briefly meeting Maya's. Today we're going to discuss why humans are considered such an unusual addition to galactic society. Maya perked up, hoping to finally understand something about her situation. Most species develop space travel and interstellar communication gradually. Over thousands of years, Dr. Kim explained. They have time to develop protocols, social structures, and cultural frameworks for dealing with other intelligent species. Humans, however, went from first-powered flight to interstellar contact in less than 100 years. A student raised what might have been a hand. It was hard to tell with some species. Professor, is it true that humans had no unified government when first contact occurred? Dr. Kim nodded. Earth had nearly 200 separate nation-states, many of which had been in conflict with each other for centuries. Most species achieved global unity before developing space travel. Humans were still fighting territorial wars when the Galactic Council made contact. Maya felt a familiar flush of embarrassment. Earth's history suddenly seemed very primitive compared to the other species around her. However, Dr. Kim continued, this unusual development pattern has given humans some unique characteristics that other species find interesting. The way she said interesting made Maya curious. But before she could ask what she meant, the class period ended. As students filed out, Dr. Kim called Maya's name. Ms. Chen, could you stay for a moment? Maya approached the professor's desk nervously. Dr. Kim studied her for a long moment before speaking. How are you adjusting so far? It's overwhelming, Maya admitted. I feel like everyone knows things I should know but don't. Dr. Kim smiled sympathetically. That's normal for any human student here. But I wanted to let you know that your scholarship is quite unusual. Most human students here are the children of diplomats or wealthy families. Academic merit scholarships for humans are extremely rare. Maya frowned. I don't understand. My grades were good, but nothing special. Your grades weren't why you were selected, Dr. Kim said carefully. The selection committee looks at many factors we don't always share with students. Just remember that you earned your place here, even if you don't understand how yet. As Maya left the classroom, Dr. Kim's words echoed in her mind. There was something about her selection that didn't make sense, and she was beginning to suspect that her presence at the academy was about more than just education. That evening, in her small dormitory room, Maya tried to contact her family on Earth, but the communication systems were more complex than anything she had used before. After struggling with the interface for an hour, she finally managed to connect. Her mother's face appeared on the holographic display, looking worried and tired. Maya, how are you, sweetheart? We've been so worried. I'm okay, Mom, Maya said, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. It's just very different here. They talked for a few minutes about her classes and the other students, but Maya could see the concern in her mother's eyes. Neither of them really understood why Maya had been chosen for this opportunity, and the uncertainty was frightening for both of them. After ending the call, Maya lay on her narrow bed and stared out the viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, looking like just another point of light among billions. She had never felt so small or so far from home, but as she drifted off to sleep, she couldn't shake the feeling that Dr. Kim knew more about her situation than she was letting on. Tomorrow, Maya decided she would start looking for answers about why she was really here. The Academy's Hidden Layers, Maya's second week at the Academy, brought new challenges and deeper mysteries. She had started to find her rhythm in most classes, though she still felt like she was constantly playing catch-up with concepts that other students seemed to absorb effortlessly. But it was during her interspecies communication class that she first noticed something odd. The professor, an elderly Nexari named Quintess, whose scaled skin shifted colors with their emotions, was teaching about the subtleties of nonverbal communication between species. Maya was taking notes when she noticed another human student enter the classroom late. It was Marcus Webb, the other human she had heard about but never met. He was tall and confident, moving through the diverse crowd of students with an ease that Maya envied. But what caught her attention was the way Professor Quintess's scales immediately shifted to a warm golden color when they saw him. "Ah, Marcus," the professor said in their melodious voice, "how did your meeting with the Research Council go?" Maya's pen stopped moving. Research Council? She had never heard of any human students having meetings with research councils. Marcus simply nodded and took a seat near the front, offering no explanation. After class, Maya tried to approach Marcus, but he was immediately surrounded by a group of older students, all speaking in rapid galactic standard about temporal displacement theories and quantum consciousness mapping. The terms meant nothing to Maya, but the level of the conversation was clearly far beyond anything taught in basic classes. Frustrated and increasingly curious, Maya decided to do some investigating on her own. The Academy's library was a massive sphere at the center of the station, containing information from thousands of worlds and species. Maya had been there once for a basic research assignment, but this time she had a different purpose. She approached the main information terminal, a complex holographic interface that responded to thought patterns as well as verbal commands. Maya had been taught the basics of using it, but she had never tried searching for anything sensitive. "I need information about human student selection processes," she said quietly to the terminal. The display flickered, showing thousands of documents in dozens of languages. Maya refined her search several times, but most of the information was either too technical for her to understand or marked with access restrictions she couldn't bypass. She was about to give up when she noticed something odd. One document was listed in the search results, but when she tried to access it, the terminal claimed it didn't exist. The listing showed just a fragment. Selection Protocol H7, Chen Maya, classification pending. Maya stared at the screen. There was a document about her specifically, but she couldn't access it. More troubling was the phrase classification pending. Classification for what? Having trouble with the research systems? Maya jumped and turned to find a student she hadn't seen before. This one was clearly human, but there was something different about him. He carried himself with the same confidence as Marcus, but his clothes were slightly different from standard academy uniforms, and his eyes seemed older than his apparent age. "I'm David Park," he said, extending his hand in the human gesture. "I'm a graduate student here. You're Maya Chen, right? The new transfer?" Maya shook his hand, noting that his grip was firm and warm. "Yes, how did you know?" David smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. News travels fast in a closed system like this, especially when it concerns humans. We're still enough of a novelty that people pay attention. "Are you working with Marcus on those research projects I keep hearing about?" David's expression became more guarded. "Marcus is involved in some advanced theoretical work. It's not uncommon for exceptional students to be invited into special programs. But not all human students." "No," David said carefully. "Not all human students." Maya sensed there was much more he wasn't saying. "Can I ask you something? Do you know why I was really selected for the academy? Everyone keeps telling me it was academic merit, but my grades weren't that special." David was quiet for a long moment, studying her face intently. Finally, he spoke. "Maya, can I give you some advice? Sometimes it's better not to ask too many questions too quickly. The academy has many layers, and not all of them are immediately visible to new students. Focus on your studies, make friends, learn about the different species here."
"The other answers will come when you're ready for them." Before Maya could respond,
David walked away, leaving her more confused than ever. That evening, Maya was in her room trying to concentrate on homework when her door chimed. She opened it to find Kiravel standing in the corridor looking nervous. "Can I come in?" Kiravel asked. "There's something I need to tell you." Maya stepped aside and Kiravel entered, immediately activating a small device that she placed on Maya's desk. The device hummed softly and projected a faint energy field around the room. "Privacy shield," Kiravel explained. "What I'm about to tell you needs to stay between us." Maya's heart started beating faster. "What's going on?" Kiravel sat on the edge of Maya's bed, her expression serious. "You've been asking questions about your selection for the academy. Questions that some people have noticed." "What people?" "Maya, the academy isn't just a school. It's also a research facility and a diplomatic center. Many of the advanced students here aren't just studying. They're working on projects for the Galactic Council. For their home governments or for research consortiums that span multiple species? Maya sat down across from her friend. What does that have to do with me? Humans are still new to galactic society, but they're already proving to be very interesting to researchers. Your species has some unusual characteristics that other species want to understand better. What kind of characteristics? Kiravel hesitated. Problem solving under pressure, adaptability, emotional resilience, and something the researchers call intuitive pattern recognition. Most species develop these traits gradually over thousands of years of evolution. Humans develop them very quickly, probably because Earth is such a dangerous and chaotic world compared to most inhabited planets. Maya thought about Earth's history of natural disasters, wars, and rapid technological change. So we're like lab rats? Not exactly, Kiravel said quickly. More like case studies. The Galactic Council is very interested in understanding how humans think and learn, because it might help them understand how to integrate other rapidly developing species in the future. And you think that's why I'm here? I think you're here because someone noticed something specific about you, Kiravel said. Something that made them think you'd be a particularly good subject for study. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. How do you know all this? Kiravel looked uncomfortable. My mother is a research coordinator for the Thessian Science Ministry. She sometimes mentions her work, and she's been following the Human Integration Project closely. When I told her about you, she got very interested and asked me to keep an eye on you. You're spying on me? Maya's voice rose. No, Kiravel said quickly. Not spying. More like watching out for you. Maya, there are factions within the Galactic Council that have very different ideas about how humans should be integrated into galactic society. Some want to study you carefully and gradually. Others want to fast-track human development. And some think humans are too dangerous and unpredictable to be trusted with advanced technology. Maya's head was spinning. This is insane. I'm just a college student. I can barely figure out how to work the food dispensers in the cafeteria. That's exactly why you're so interesting to them, Kiravel said. You represent the average human, not the exceptional ones like Marcus. The Council wants to understand how typical humans respond to exposure to advanced galactic civilization. Maya stood up and paced to her viewport, looking out at the stars. So what happens now? Do I just pretend I don't know any of this? For now, yes, Kiravel said. But Maya, there's something else. My mother told me that there's going to be some kind of evaluation process for human students. Something beyond regular academic assessment. I don't know what it involves, but it's supposed to happen soon. Maya turned back to her friend. What kind of evaluation? I don't know. But Maya, whatever it is, you need to be prepared. And you need to be careful who you trust. Not everyone here has your best interests in mind. After Kiravel left, Maya sat in her darkened room for hours, thinking about everything she had learned. She had come to the academy thinking she was getting the education of a lifetime. Instead, she had apparently walked into the middle of some kind of galactic political experiment. She thought about calling her parents, but what could she tell them? That their daughter was being studied like a specimen? That her entire presence at the academy might be part of some larger agenda she didn't understand? Instead, Maya pulled up her academic files on her room's computer terminal. She scrolled through her classes, her grades, her student records. Everything looked normal and straightforward. But now she looked at it all with new eyes, wondering what hidden purposes her education might be serving. Unexpected abilities. Surface Maya's investigation into her situation took an unexpected turn during her third week at the academy. She had been carefully observing patterns in how different students were treated, noting which ones had access to restricted areas and advanced programs. What she discovered was more complex than she had imagined. It started during her applied xenopsychology class, taught by Professor Del Miran, a Catherian whose crystalline body segments could shift and reconfigure based on their emotional state. The class was discussing problem-solving approaches across different species when Professor Del Miran presented a puzzle. This is a classic scenario used to test adaptive thinking, the professor explained, projecting a complex three-dimensional hologram into the center of the classroom. You are trapped in a damaged space vessel with limited oxygen, no communication with the outside, and systems failing in sequence. You have access to standard emergency supplies and basic tools. Your goal is survival until rescue arrives, but you don't know when that will be. Maya studied the hologram, noting the layout of the damaged ship. Other students began discussing the problem in their various languages, some working in groups that seemed to organize along species lines. Maya noticed that most approaches focused on either technical solutions, repairing specific systems, or on resource conservation, rationing supplies to last as long as possible. But as Maya looked at the scenario, she saw something different. The damage pattern to the ship wasn't random. It followed a specific sequence that suggested the failures were connected. If she could identify the root cause, she might be able to prevent further system failures rather than just managing them. Without thinking, Maya stood up and approached the hologram. "Professor, may I manipulate the display?" Professor Delmoran's crystalline segments shifted to a pale blue color that Maya had learned indicated curiosity. "Of course, Maya, what do you see?" Maya gestured at the hologram, rotating it and highlighting different damaged areas. The failure pattern suggests a cascade effect originating from the power distribution center. But if you look at the timing of the failures, they don't match what you'd expect from a simple overload. She manipulated the display further, showing the progression of damage over time. The pattern suggests sabotage, not accident. Someone wanted the ship to fail gradually, which means they wanted the crew to have time to escape. If this is sabotage, then the saboteur might have left a way to stop the cascade. Maya traced a path through the ship's schematics. If you bypass the main power distribution and reroute through the emergency backup systems here and here, you can isolate the damaged sections and potentially restore basic life support to the entire ship. The classroom had fallen completely silent. Maya looked around to find every student and Professor Delmoran staring at her. The professor's crystalline body had shifted to a deep gold color that Maya didn't recognize. "That's a very unusual approach, Maya," Professor Delmoran said slowly. "Most species approach this scenario as a resource management problem or an engineering challenge. You approached it as a mystery to be solved. Isn't that what it was?" Maya asked, suddenly feeling self-conscious. "Actually, yes," the professor admitted. "This scenario is based on a real incident that occurred 15 years ago. A human freighter captain named Sarah Martinez solved it, using almost exactly the approach you just described. The incident is classified, but it's studied in advanced xenopsychology courses as an example of uniquely human problem-solving." Maya felt her cheeks burn as dozens of alien eyes continued to stare at her. "I just looked at the patterns and tried to figure out what made sense." "Exactly," Professor Delmoran said. "That's what makes it so interesting." After class, Maya was approached by several students who had never spoken to her before. A tall ethereal named Zara 9 was particularly intrigued. "Your mind processes information very differently than most species," Zara 9 said, their telepathic voice echoing directly in Maya's thoughts. "When you were solving that puzzle, your brain activity was unlike anything I've observed before." Maya stepped back instinctively. She had been warned about ethereal telepathy, but experiencing it directly was unsettling. "What do you mean?" "Most species think in linear patterns or structured hierarchies," Zara 9 explained. "Even my people, despite our telepathic abilities, process information in predictable ways. But humans seem to make connections across completely unrelated concepts. It's chaotic, but surprisingly effective." Over the following days, Maya noticed that her professors began paying closer attention to her responses in class. In galactic economics, she proposed a solution to a trade dispute by suggesting that the real conflict wasn't about resources, but about cultural pride. In stellar navigation, she identified an error in a star chart by noticing that the positioning data didn't match the gravitational effects that should have been present. Each time, her solutions were correct, but approached from angles that surprised her instructors. Maya began to realize that what felt like normal thinking to her was apparently unusual by galactic standards. The realization became more significant when she was called to meet with Dean Varkothan, the Academy's chief administrator. The Dean was a massive Krillian, one of the species known for their military precision and strategic thinking. Their office was austere and intimidating, with walls covered in certificates and awards from dozens of worlds. "Ms. Chen," Dean Varkothan said, their voice a low rumble that seemed to resonate through the floor. "Your professors have been discussing your performance in classes. They find your approach to problem-solving distinctive." Maya sat carefully in the chair across from the dean's imposing desk. "Is that a problem, sir?" "On the contrary," the dean said, leaning forward. "It's exactly what we were hoping to observe." Maya, I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you. Your selection for the Academy wasn't random, and it wasn't based on your academic performance on Earth. Maya's heart rate increased. What was it based on? Dean Varkothan activated a holographic display showing what appeared to be psychological assessment data. 12 years ago, when you were 8 years old, you participated in a problem-solving exercise at your elementary school. The exercise was part of a broader study being conducted by human researchers working with Galactic Council observers. Maya stared at the display, trying to remember what the dean was referring to. I don't remember anything like that. You wouldn't, the dean said. To you and your classmates, it would have seemed like a normal classroom activity. But the human researchers were working with our xenopsychology teams to identify children who demonstrated particular types of cognitive patterns. The holographic display showed a recording of what looked like a classroom full of young children working on puzzles. Maya watched as an 8-year-old version of herself approached a complex maze problem, not by trying to solve it step by step, but by first studying the overall pattern to understand the maze creator's logic. Most children try to solve mazes by trial and error, Dean Varkothan explained. You solved it by understanding the mind that created it. This type of metacognitive thinking is extremely rare in most species, including humans, but when it does appear, it represents a significant adaptation advantage. Maya watched her younger self solve the maze in minutes while other children struggled with it for much longer. So you've been watching me since I was 8? Not watching, the dean corrected. Waiting. We wanted to see how this type of thinking would develop as you matured. Your academic performance was irrelevant. What mattered was whether you would retain and develop this cognitive flexibility. And if I hadn't? Dean Varkothan's expression was unreadable. Then you would have lived a normal life on Earth, none the wiser. But you did develop it, and now you're here. Maya felt a mixture of anger and confusion. So my entire life has been some kind of experiment? No, the dean said firmly. Your life has been your own. But your potential has been of interest to multiple parties. Maya, do you understand what first contact between humans and the Galactic Council actually involved? Maya shook her head. 30 years ago, when Council explorers first approached Earth, they expected to find a typical developing civilization. Most species at your technological level are unified, peaceful and cautious about expansion. Humans were none of those things. The dean activated another display showing historical footage of early human-alien encounters. Your species was fragmented, aggressive, and already beginning to spread beyond your home planet despite barely achieving interstellar communication. By galactic standards, humans were developing at an impossible rate. Maya watched footage of the early diplomatic meetings, noting the tension and confusion on both sides. The Council faced a choice, Dean Varkothan continued. They could impose development restrictions on humanity, guide your species more gradually, or attempt to integrate you as you were. They chose integration, but with careful monitoring. And people like me are part of that monitoring? People like you are part of understanding whether the choice was correct, the dean said. Maya, your species has potential that even the Council doesn't fully understand. But with that potential comes risk. Humans learn and adapt faster than any known species. But you also have a tendency toward unpredictable behavior. Maya stood up, pacing to the window that looked out over the Academy's central plaza. Below, she could see students from dozens of species moving between classes, their interactions seeming peaceful and orderly. What happens now? She asked. Now that you've told me all this? Now you continue your education, Dean Varkothan said, but with a better understanding of why you're here. Maya, the Academy isn't just teaching you about galactic civilization. It's teaching galactic civilization about humanity. Your responses, your solutions, your way of thinking, all of it is being studied and shared with researchers across the galaxy. And if they don't like what they learn, the dean was quiet for a moment, then humanity's integration into galactic society will become much more complicated. As Maya left the dean's office, her mind was racing with the implications of what she had learned. She wasn't just a student. She was a representative of her entire species, whether she wanted to be or not. Every decision she made, every problem she solved was being evaluated as an example of human potential. The weight of that responsibility was overwhelming, but as Maya walked back to her dormitory, she realized something else. If the Galactic Council wanted to understand humanity, she could help them understand it correctly. She could show them that humans weren't just chaotic and unpredictable. They were adaptable, creative, and capable of growth. But first, she needed to understand more about what other conclusions the Council might be reaching about her species. And that meant finding out what was happening with the other human students, particularly Marcus and David. The critical test Maya's understanding of her situation crystallized during her 4th week at the Academy, when she was assigned what appeared to be a routine project for her Galactic Crisis Management course. Professor Thainvel, an ancient Nixari whose scales had turned silver with age, presented the class with a complex scenario that seemed designed to test multiple skills simultaneously. You are serving as advisors to the Galactic Council during a developing crisis, Professor Thainvel announced, their voice carrying the weight of centuries of experience. A massive space station serving as a refugee center for displaced populations from the Outer Rim conflicts has suffered catastrophic system failures. 15 million beings from 12 different species are trapped with failing life support, limited resources, and no possibility of immediate evacuation. Maya felt her stomach tighten as she realized the scope of the scenario. Around her, other students began accessing data tablets and forming discussion groups, but Maya found herself studying the professor's expression. There was something in Thainvel's ancient eyes that suggested this wasn't just an academic exercise. The station's infrastructure was designed by Altarian engineers 50 years ago, the professor continued, but it has been modified repeatedly by different species to accommodate various refugee populations. The current crisis began when these modifications created unexpected system interactions during a routine maintenance cycle. Professor Thainvel activated a massive holographic display, showing the station's complex layout. Maya studied the 3-dimensional structure, noting the layers of modifications and additions that had been grafted onto the original design. It looked like an engineering nightmare, systems from different technological traditions all trying to work together. Your task, the professor said, is to develop a comprehensive response plan that addresses immediate survival needs, long-term resource management, and the complex social dynamics of a desperate multi-species population. You have access to all relevant technical specifications, population data, and resource inventories. Your recommendations will be evaluated based on both practical feasibility and ethical considerations. As Maya dove into the data, she quickly realized why this scenario was so challenging. The refugee populations had vastly different physiological needs. Some required high oxygen environments while others needed methane-based atmospheres. The food systems were designed for completely different nutritional requirements. Even the waste management systems had been customized for different biological processes. But what struck Maya as even more complex was the social dimension. The refugee populations included species that had been at war with each other in the Outer Rim conflicts. Traditional enemies were now trapped together in a failing station, competing for limited resources while their survival depended on cooperation. Maya spent hours studying the data, but unlike her classmates who were focusing on technical solutions, she found herself drawn to understanding the underlying causes of the crisis. The more she studied the station's modification history, the more convinced she became that the current problems weren't just the result of incompatible technologies. She pulled up the records of when each modification had been made and which engineering teams had been responsible. What she found made her pause. Many of the modifications that were now causing problems had been implemented by the same engineering consortium, despite the fact that they came from different species and were supposedly working independently. Maya cross-referenced the modification schedules with political events in the Outer Rim conflicts. The pattern that emerged was disturbing. Many of the problematic modifications had been made just before major escalations in the conflicts that had driven new waves of refugees to the station. Professor Thainvel, Maya said, raising her hand during the class discussion period. I think there's something we need to consider about this scenario. The professor's silver scales shimmered as they turned their attention to Maya. Yes, Ms. Chen? The system failures aren't accidental, Maya said. Someone has been deliberately sabotaging the station's infrastructure over several years, timing the modifications to create maximum chaos when refugee populations peak. The classroom fell silent. Other students looked at Maya with expressions ranging from confusion to skepticism. A Krillian student named Vextor spoke up. That's a very serious accusation, Maya. What evidence supports this theory? Maya activated her own display, showing the modification timeline she had constructed. Look at the pattern. Every major modification that's contributing to the current crisis was implemented by members of the Hegemony Engineering Consortium. But the consortium supposedly represents member species that are enemies of each other in the Outer Rim conflicts. She highlighted specific data points on her timeline. More importantly, look at when these modifications were made. Each one was completed just weeks before events that drove massive refugee populations to the station. Someone with knowledge of military planning had to be coordinating both the sabotage and the conflicts that would make the sabotage most devastating. Professor Thainvell's scales had shifted to a deep blue color that Maya had learned indicated intense focus. Continue, Ms. Chen. The entire refugee crisis is artificial, Maya said, her confidence growing as the pattern became clearer. Someone has been manipulating the Outer Rim conflicts to drive population displacement, then sabotaging the refugee infrastructure to create exactly this situation. 15 million desperate beings trapped in a failing station with no hope of rescue. But why would anyone want to create such a crisis? Asked Kiravel, who was enrolled in the same class. Maya studied the population data more carefully, noting the specific species represented among the refugees. Because the refugees include representatives from every major species in the Outer Rim, if the station fails catastrophically and millions die, it will be seen as proof that multi-species cooperation is impossible. The tragedy will justify increased isolation and militarization throughout the galaxy. That's an extremely cynical interpretation, said Zara 9, the ethereal student. Surely you're not suggesting that the Galactic Council would engineer such a catastrophe. Not the Council, Maya said. But there are factions within galactic society that benefit from conflict and instability. Arms manufacturers, security corporations, isolationist political movements. A disaster of this magnitude would shift galactic politics toward policies that benefit all of those groups. Professor Thainvell moved closer to Maya's display. Assuming your analysis is correct, Ms. Chen, how would this change your response recommendations? Maya felt the weight of the question. If her analysis was right, then conventional solutions would be playing into the saboteur's hands. Simply fixing the technical problems wouldn't address the underlying conspiracy, and might even provide opportunities for additional sabotage. First, Maya said, we need to identify and isolate the saboteurs before they can trigger additional failures. That means conducting detailed background checks on all engineering personnel who have access to critical systems, and reviewing all modification work done by the Hegemony Consortium. Second, we need to turn the social dynamics on the station from a liability into an asset. Instead of seeing the multi-species population as a problem to be managed, we need to demonstrate that cooperation between former enemies is not only possible but beneficial. Maya activated a new display showing her proposed organizational structure. I recommend forming integrated work teams that include members from conflicting species, tasked with solving specific technical problems. The pressure of the crisis will force them to work together, and success will create bonds that transcend their historical conflicts. And third, Maya continued, we need to make the station's success visible to the broader galaxy. Instead of treating this as a humanitarian crisis to be quietly managed, we should document and broadcast the cooperation between species. Turn the saboteurs' plan against them by showing that multi-species collaboration becomes stronger under pressure, not weaker. The classroom was completely silent now, with dozens of alien eyes focused on Maya. Professor Thainvell's scales had shifted to a golden color that Maya didn't recognize. Ms. Chen, the professor said slowly, your analysis raises some very serious implications. Are you prepared to defend these conclusions to a broader audience? Maya felt a moment of panic as she realized what the professor was suggesting. You mean this isn't just a class exercise? The scenario I presented is based on a real situation that developed 3 days ago, Professor Thainvell confirmed. Station Kepler 7 in the Vega system is currently experiencing exactly the crisis I described. The Galactic Council's emergency response teams have been working around the clock, but their solutions have been largely ineffective. Maya's heart started racing. So my analysis will be transmitted to the Council's crisis management team within the hour, the professor said. Along with your recommendations. Ms. Chen, If you're correct about sabotage, you may have identified the key factor that has been preventing effective response. And if you're wrong, crisis resolution and consequences. The next 18 hours transformed Maya from an anonymous student into the center of a galactic crisis response. Within minutes of Professor Thainvel transmitting her analysis to the Galactic Council, Maya found herself in a secure communication chamber, speaking directly with the emergency response coordinators at Station Kepler-7. The chamber was equipped with real-time, holographic projection systems that made her feel as though she was standing directly on the bridge of the crisis response vessel. Around her, dozens of beings from various species worked frantically at control stations, their faces showing the strain of 3 days without sleep. Commander Vex Kara, a Krillian military officer leading the response effort, materialized in front of Maya as a full-sized hologram. Her armor bore the marks of recent combat and her expression was grim. "Student Chen," the commander said, "your sabotage theory has reached the highest levels of council leadership. Before we act on your recommendations, I need you to understand what you're suggesting. If you're correct, we're dealing with a conspiracy that reaches into multiple governments and could destabilize galactic politics for decades." Maya took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 15 million lives pressing down on her. "Commander, I understand the implications, but the pattern in the data is too clear to ignore. Someone has been planning this crisis for years." "Then help us prove it," Commander Vex Kara said. She gestured, and the chamber filled with holographic displays showing real-time data from Station Kepler-7. "My engineering teams are standing by to begin the modifications you suggested. But first we need to identify the saboteurs you claim are still on the station." Maya studied the personnel records scrolling past her. The station currently housed over 200 engineering and maintenance staff from dozens of species, any of whom could have access to critical systems. Finding conspirators among them would normally take weeks of investigation, but as Maya examined the data, she realized she could narrow the search significantly. "Commander, the sabotage pattern shows precise timing with refugee arrivals. Whoever is doing this needs real-time intelligence about military operations in the Outer Rim conflicts. Meaning they need access to classified military communications," Maya said. "How many people on the station have that level of security clearance?" Commander Vex Kara's expression shifted. 17 individuals have access to classified military channels. "But Maya, those are senior officers and government representatives. If any of them are involved, then this goes much higher than simple engineering sabotage," Maya finished. "Commander, can you run a data trace on communications from the station to external networks over the past 6 months? The commander gestured to one of her technical officers who began implementing Maya's request. Within minutes, communication logs appeared in the holographic display around them. Maya studied the patterns, looking for anomalies in timing and frequency. What she found made her heart race. "There," she said, pointing to a cluster of encrypted transmissions. Every major system failure on the station was preceded by a burst of encrypted communications to an untraceable address in the neutral zone. Those transmissions came from... The technical officer paused, checking the logs. Council Representative Jack Marin of the Hegemony Diplomatic Corps. The bridge fell silent. Commander Vex Kara's scales shifted to a dark red color that Maya recognized as anger mixed with shock. "Representative Jack Marin has been coordinating refugee placement across the Outer Rim for 3 years. They have access to military intelligence, refugee movement schedules, and engineering modification approvals. And they've been using that access to create this crisis," Maya said. "Commander, we need to arrest Jack Marin immediately, but carefully. If they realize they've been discovered, they might trigger additional sabotage." Commander Vex Kara turned to her security chief. "Coordinate with station security to place Representative Jack Marin under discreet surveillance. I want to know their location and activities for the past 72 hours." As the security arrangements were being made, Maya continued studying the station's technical systems. Her analysis had identified the sabotage, but they still needed to fix the immediate crisis affecting 15 million refugees. "Commander," Maya said, "I need to speak with your lead engineer. The modifications needed to stabilize the station are more complex than I initially realized." Chief Engineer Yola Sen, a massive ethereal whose telepathic abilities allowed them to interface directly with the station's computer systems, materialized next to Maya. Their mental voice resonated with exhaustion and frustration. Student Chen, we have attempted 37 different repair approaches over the past 3 days. The system interactions are too complex for conventional solutions. That's because the sabotage was designed to make conventional solutions impossible, Maya explained. But if we approach it as a puzzle rather than an engineering problem, there's a way through. Maya activated her own display, showing a 3-dimensional model of the station's infrastructure. The saboteurs made each modification look beneficial in isolation, but collectively they create cascade failures. However, they had to leave some systems unmodified to maintain their own access to the station. She highlighted several areas in the station's core. These are the original Altarian systems that haven't been touched. If we reroute critical functions through the original pathways and bypass all the modifications, we can restore basic life support to the entire station. Chief Engineer Yolesen studied Maya's proposal, their telepathic abilities allowing them to process the technical details at superhuman speed. This approach would work, but it requires manually reconfiguring hundreds of system interfaces. With current staffing, such modifications would take weeks. Not if we use the refugee populations, Maya said. Many of them are skilled technicians and engineers from their homeworlds. Instead of treating them as victims to be rescued, we organize them into work teams to help save themselves. Commander Vex Kara looked skeptical. Maya, these populations include species that have been at war with each other. Asking them to work together during a crisis will prove that cooperation is possible even under the worst circumstances, Maya interrupted. Commander, this is exactly what the saboteurs don't want to happen. They're counting on desperation and fear to drive the populations apart. If we demonstrate that crisis brings people together instead of driving them apart, we turn their entire strategy against them. The commander considered this for a moment, then nodded. Chief Engineer, implement Student Chen's technical recommendations. Security Chief, coordinate with refugee population leaders to organize work teams, and communications prepare to broadcast the entire operation across the galactic networks. Broadcasting? Maya asked. If this works, Commander Vexkara said, the galaxy needs to see it. And if there are other stations or facilities that have been similarly sabotaged, this operation might provide the template for saving them as well. Over the next several hours, Maya watched her theoretical analysis transform into practical action. Representative Jack Marin was quietly arrested, and their personal files revealed a vast conspiracy involving arms manufacturers and isolationist political groups across multiple species. The conspiracy had been engineering refugee crises for years, using each tragedy to justify increased military spending and reduced cooperation between species. More importantly, Maya watched as her social recommendations proved correct. Refugee populations that had been at war with each other just days earlier began working together to repair the station's life support systems. Former enemies shared technical expertise and resources, united by their common need for survival. The broadcasts of these cooperation efforts went out across the galaxy, transmitted by news networks and council communication channels. Maya watched as beings from dozens of worlds saw former enemies working side by side, solving complex technical problems through collaboration rather than conflict. Within 12 hours, the station's life support systems were fully restored. Within 24 hours, the refugee populations had not only solved the immediate crisis, but had begun implementing improvements to the station's infrastructure that would prevent similar problems in the future. Maya found herself once again in the communication chamber, but this time the mood was completely different. Commander Vexkara's scales showed bright gold colors indicating satisfaction and respect. Student Chen, the commander said, your analysis didn't just save 15 million lives. It exposed a conspiracy that has been destabilizing the Outer Rim for years, and it demonstrated that multi-species cooperation becomes stronger under pressure, not weaker. What happens now? Maya asked. Now the real work begins, Commander Vexkara replied. The conspiracy reached into multiple governments and organizations. Unraveling it completely will take months. But more importantly, your approach to the crisis, treating social dynamics as assets rather than problems, is being studied by crisis response teams across the galaxy. As Maya left the communication chamber, she realized that everything had changed. She was no longer a student being evaluated. She had become a consultant whose insights were actively sought by galactic leadership. Her unconventional thinking hadn't just proven its value, it had demonstrated capabilities that the galaxy desperately needed. But as she walked back to her dormitory, Maya also realized that her test was far from over. If one human student could solve a crisis that had stumped the galaxy's best minds, the questions about humanity's role in galactic civilization were just beginning. The success at Station Kepler-7 would either prove that humans were valuable partners for the Galactic Council, or it would raise concerns about human influence growing too quickly. Either way, Maya knew that her life and her species' future had just become much more complicated. The new paradigm 3 weeks after the Station Kepler-7 crisis, Maya found herself in a situation she never could have imagined. Instead of attending regular classes, she was sitting in the Academy's most secure conference room, surrounded by representatives from 12 different species and 3 different galactic government councils. The formal title of the meeting was Assessment of Human Cognitive Integration Protocols, but Maya understood. It was really about deciding humanity's future role in galactic civilization. Her success at Kepler-7 had accelerated a debate that was supposed to take years to resolve. Ambassador Thex Neela of the Central Council, an ancient Vorthan whose crystalline form contained the accumulated wisdom of centuries, served as the meeting's moderator. Their voice resonated with harmonics that made the entire room vibrate softly. "We are here," Ambassador Thex Neela announced, "to evaluate the implications of recent events involving human cognitive contributions to galactic crisis management. Student Chen, your analysis and recommendations regarding Station Kepler-7 have had far-reaching consequences that extend well beyond the immediate crisis." Maya sat straighter in her chair, acutely aware that every word she spoke would be analyzed and recorded. Around the table, alien faces studied her with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern to something that might have been fear. In the 3 weeks since the Kepler-7 incident, the ambassador continued, 17 similar sabotage conspiracies have been uncovered across the galaxy. Each investigation used analytical approaches based on your methodology. More significantly, the social cooperation protocols you recommended have been successfully implemented in 12 other refugee crises. A representative from the Krillian Defense Council, General Vaktorson, leaned forward. "Student Chen, your species has been part of galactic civilization for 30 years. In that time, humans have gone from primitive newcomers to essential crisis management consultants. This rate of integration is unprecedented in galactic history." Maya sensed that this wasn't entirely meant as a compliment. "General, I think the speed of integration reflects necessity rather than ambition. The galaxy has been facing problems that traditional approaches couldn't solve. Human thinking offers different perspectives, but that doesn't mean we're trying to replace existing methods, doesn't it?" asked Counselor Zixmer of the Ethereal Collective, their telepathic voice echoing directly in Maya's mind. "Your approach to the Kepler-7 crisis didn't just solve the immediate problem. It challenged fundamental assumptions about crisis management, social dynamics, and the nature of cooperation itself." Maya felt the weight of dozens of minds focusing on her, some with mechanical precision, others with telepathic intensity, all seeking to understand something about human cognition that they found both valuable and unsettling. "Counselor," Maya said carefully, "I think the success at Kepler-7 happened because human thinking is complementary to galactic approaches, not competitive with them. We see patterns and possibilities that others might miss, but that doesn't make traditional methods wrong or obsolete." Ambassador Thex Neela activated a holographic display showing statistical analyses from across the galaxy. "Student Chen, since the Kepler-7 incident, human consultants have been requested for 47 different crisis situations. In 39 cases, human insights led to successful resolutions that had eluded conventional approaches." The display showed a map of the galaxy with crisis points highlighted in different colors. Maya realized she was looking at a visual representation of her species' growing influence on galactic affairs. "However," the ambassador continued, "this rapid integration has also generated significant concerns. Representative Kolvash of the Stability Coalition has requested permission to address these concerns directly." A new figure materialized in the hologram field. A tall, imposing being whose species Maya didn't recognize. Their skin seemed to shift between different metallic colors, and their voice carried undertones that suggested they communicated through multiple frequency ranges simultaneously. Student Chen, Representative Kolvash said, "The Stability Coalition represents 47 member species who share concerns about the rate of human integration into critical galactic systems. Your species displays cognitive patterns that are unprecedented in galactic history. But unprecedented is not always beneficial." Maya felt her heart rate increase, but tried to keep her expression neutral. "What specific concerns does the coalition have?" "Humans solve problems by challenging fundamental assumptions," the representative said. "This approach can be valuable, but it can also be destabilizing. Your species questions authority, breaks established protocols, and implements solutions that disrupt existing power structures." Representative Kolvash activated their own display, showing social and political analysis from various worlds. "In every system where human consultants have been active, we observe increased questioning of traditional leadership, challenges to established procedures, and social movements demanding rapid change. Your cognitive flexibility is infectious, Student Chen, and not all societies benefit from sudden transformation." Maya studied the data, seeing protests, reform movements, and political upheavals across dozens of worlds. For the first time, she began to understand why her species' integration was controversial. "Representative Kolvash," she said slowly, "are you suggesting that human thinking is inherently dangerous to galactic stability?" "I'm suggesting that your species' approach to problem-solving assumes that all problems can and should be solved quickly," the representative replied. "But some problems exist because they represent carefully maintained balances between competing interests. When humans solve these problems, they often create new conflicts that are more difficult to manage." General Vaktorsen spoke up again. "Student Chen, the Krillian Defense Council has documented 17 instances where human-recommended solutions to local conflicts have led to broader regional instabilities. Your species sees individual problems in isolation, but doesn't always consider the broader systemic implications of rapid change." Maya felt herself getting defensive, but forced herself to consider their criticisms objectively. "General, could you give me a specific example?" The general activated a case study showing a trade dispute between two agricultural worlds. 3 months ago, human consultants recommended solving a resource allocation conflict by implementing new agricultural technologies that would increase production on both worlds. The solution worked technically, but it disrupted traditional farming communities, created unemployment, and led to social unrest that required military intervention. Maya studied the case data, seeing the unintended consequences of what had seemed like a straightforward solution. "I understand your concern, General. But wouldn't the alternative have been to let the resource conflict escalate into potential warfare?" "Perhaps," the general admitted. "But the traditional approach would have been to mediate a gradual compromise that preserved existing social structures while slowly addressing the resource needs. It would have taken longer, but it would have been more stable." Ambassador Thex Neela spoke again, their harmonics shifting to what Maya recognized as a formal tone. "Student Chen, this debate represents a fundamental question about the future of galactic civilization. Do we prioritize rapid problem-solving and adaptation, or do we prioritize stability and gradual change?" Maya realized that this wasn't just about her performance or even about human integration. This was about choosing between two completely different approaches to managing a galaxy-spanning civilization. "Ambassador," she said, "I don't think those approaches have to be mutually exclusive. What if human cognitive abilities were used more strategically, focused on problems that truly require radical solutions while leaving stable systems undisturbed?" Counselor Zixmer's telepathic voice carried a note of interest. "Explain your proposal, Student Chen." Maya took a deep breath, knowing that her next words might determine her species' future. "The galaxy could establish a crisis response protocol that uses human consultants specifically for situations where traditional approaches have failed after reasonable attempts. Instead of integrating human thinking into routine governance, reserve it for genuine emergencies that threaten lives or stability." She activated her own display, showing a proposed organizational structure. Human consultants would work in partnership with traditional galactic experts, providing alternative perspectives only when conventional solutions prove inadequate. This would preserve existing stable systems while ensuring that crisis situations can be resolved quickly when necessary. Representative Kolvash studied Maya's proposal. And how would you prevent the cognitive contamination that concerns the Stability Coalition? Human thinking patterns do seem to spread to other species who work closely with your consultants. By making the collaboration temporary and focused, Maya replied, instead of embedding human thinkers in long-term governance structures, deploy them for specific crisis situations and then rotate them out. This would provide the benefits of human cognitive flexibility without disrupting stable systems. The room fell silent as the various representatives considered Maya's proposal. She could see them engaging in rapid consultations through their various CE,